Well, okay. So the Germans are involved and someone's surrounded. So what else is new? The Germans are surrounded? Wow. Well, where is this? Is North Africa? Where? November 6, 1942. It is something the Axis powers have achieved time and again in this war. The Allies not so much, but this week, it comes to them. This week, the Allies break through. I'm Indy Neidell. This is World War II. Last week, the Second Battle of El Alamein continued in North Africa, with Bernard Montgomery ordering his breakout attack at the end of the week. The Japanese lost on land at Guadalcanal, but scored a naval victory in the Battle of Santa Cruz, and the Axis were advancing in the Caucasus, stopping a Soviet offensive south of Stalingrad, and still trying to take the city's great factories. In the wake of the ferocious assaults on Chuikov's defenses in Stalingrad's factory district, Paulus's army controlled more than 90% of Stalingrad and was within sight of the Volga at virtually every point along its front, but had yet to achieve the objective assigned by Hitler. The remnants of Chuikov's undermanned and undersupplied army clung stubbornly to multiple elongated bridges along the river's western bank. Already back on September 13th, Soviet commanders Georgy Zhukov and Alexander Vasilevsky proposed a counteroffensive against the Axis forces attacking Stalingrad. The city would have to hold until November, though, with Vasily Chuikov's 62nd Army as live bait for them to put it together. Well, it is now November, and the city holds. So what is the status of such a counteroffensive? The status is that Operation Uranus is very much in the works and will begin in the not-too-distant future. The basic idea is to surround the 6th Army and 4th Panzer Army, those forces attacking the city itself, in a pincer movement by attacking the weaker forces on their flanks, specifically but not limited to the Romanian armies. The basic scale has been enlarged by now. The whole counteroffensive is to be a single operation by the Stalingrad, Don, and southwestern fronts on a battlefront of 320 or so kilometers. The main attack northwest of the city will happen southwest of Serafimovich. There, the southwestern front will attack out from its bridgehead on the Don, destroy the 3rd Romanian Army, and drive on Kalach. This is going to be developed after that as an outer encirclement with a drive to the Kriv and Chir rivers. The idea is to link up with the Stalingrad front, attacking from the Sarpa Lakes towards Sovietsky to encircle the troops within the city, but whose flank would also attack towards Abganarovo and Kotelnikovo, which would set up the other encirclement. The Don front will attack from Kletskaya and head towards Vertiachi to hit the enemy in the little bend of the river. The schedule is for the Don and southwestern fronts to attack now on the 9th, the Stalingrad front the 10th. This because it is really important for them to have all of the shock groups from all 3 fronts in the Kalach-Sovietsky region at the same time. If they can do this, which would mean the southwestern front making 100 kilometers in 3 days and the Stalingrad front 80 in 2 days, they will be in the rear of the Axis forces attacking to the Volga, who would then be isolated from their supply lines. We released a special that talks about all of this. But the fronts have been filling up week after week, and it has been a major feat of logistics. Each front has only one railway line to serve them, and those are under attack and under surveillance by the enemy. But still, all this week, units are getting into their start positions. And today, Reinhard Gehlen of German intelligence writes that Army Group Center is the likely target for any large-scale Soviet attacks. Captured Russian documents tended to confirm this forecast. If the Russians required a decisive success, as indeed they did, then most logically, they must seek it against Army Group Center. The heaviest blows would most probably fall on 2nd Panzer. In the south, the situation was unclear, but it could be stated with confidence that given Russian resources, 2 major offensives were out of the question. And it was on the Western Front that the Russians might most effectively win their strategic goals. And Prokofy Romanenko's 5th Tank Army this week moves by night over the River Don into positions some 15 kilometers behind the front. On the 3rd, Zhukov arrives at Romanenko's headquarters to go over operational plans with his corps and divisional commanders. On the 4th, he has a meeting at Serafimovich to coordinate the operations of the 21st and 65th Armies. Galen is very much mistaken about the Soviet offensive coming against Army Group Center. As for the German troops actually in and around Stalingrad, the unfavorable operating conditions for armor, the disappointing effect of massive German artillery and Luftwaffe support, and lastly, the German formation's lack of training and house-to-house fighting had resulted in dramatic losses of infantry battle strength. By the turn of the month, a number of divisions, mainly the 79th, 94th, and 305th Infantry Divisions, and also the 14th and 24th Armored Divisions, had to be classified as no longer capable of attack. Adolf Hitler still does not accede to 6th Army Commander Friedrich Paulus's request for grenadier regiments moved in from 4th Panzer Army to his, or the suggestion that they suspend the whole offensive for 8 days to recover, though with both sides preparing for what they considered the climactic stage of the struggle for the city, combat action ceased almost entirely on November 4th. This relative lull lasts until the end of the week. As November begins to unfold, the waters of the Volga River begin to freeze. Ice flows in the river will be a major problem to the river traffic supplying and reinforcing Chuikov's beleaguered 62nd Army. So Paulus is going to try one last offensive, one more big operation in the factory district. He thinks the Lazur chemical factory is his most important objective. Taking this would isolate the southern half of Chuikov's army. This time, he will include 8 pioneer battalions and their demolition equipment, and they will blast a path for the infantry to head through. This is Operation Hubertus, and will kick off next week. On the 2nd, Hitler agrees to send in the pioneers. Today, though, Hitler's Army Group B order to 6th Army is, before resuming the attack to recapture the Lazur chemical factory, the 2 sections of the city the enemy still holds east of the gun factory and east of the steel factory are to be taken. Only after the bank of the Volga there is entirely in German hands will the assault on the chemical factory begin. There are some Germans who find themselves under heavy assault this week to the south in the Caucasus. Eberhard von Mackensen's panzers continue their attacks as the week starts. The 13th Division eastward from the Aruk River, the 31st, with the Romanian mountain troops guarding their flanks, and the 23rd Panzers towards Alagir, reaching it the 1st and taking it the 5th. The 13th Panzers continue their drive towards Orjonikidze, but even though Luftwaffe bombing raids against the troops reinforcing the city killed Pavel Bodin, Transcaucasian Front Chief of Staff, by the time the attackers reach the city, they are outnumbered, stuck in minefields, and when rains come, without aerial support. And today, when the Soviets counterattack, they surround the 13th Panzers in a pincer movement. So they're in big trouble as the week ends. And Erwin Rommel and the Axis forces are in big trouble this week in North Africa. As the week begins, the Australian division reaches the coast and cuts off the German 164th Division. Rommel, of course, counterattacks, and most of the 164th escapes the trap. But both 90 Light Division and the 21st Panzers are totally occupied doing that. And Operation Supercharge begins while they are. This is the Allied breakout attempt I talked about last week, postponed one day till the night of November 1st. The New Zealanders advance at 1 a.m. and with no tanks to oppose them, open a 20-kilometer gap in the defenses by morning, and 10th Corps is finally free of the minefields. Okay, this is not as easy as it sounds. The 9th Armored Brigade loses 87 tanks, but they hold open the gap and the 1st Armored Division deploys. In the afternoon of the 2nd, they do run into Rommel himself near Tel El Akakir, and he runs a great and outnumbered defense that stops them. But the Highland Division has also broken out by then, and there are Allied units now beyond Sidi Rahman. The armored cars are causing chaos in the enemy rear among columns of retreating soldiers, mainly Italian. Interestingly enough, Rommel considered retreating already last week on the 29th, but he did not, partly because he had no transport for the Italian infantry. But he wants to start doing so now, hoping to make a stand at Fuka. Adolf Hitler, however, has other ideas and cancels the withdrawal order, telling Rommel there must be no road there than to victory or death. Rommel wires to him about this, and Hitler's reply arrives the 5th. Rommel should do what Rommel thinks is best. Well, it is now too late for Rommel to do what Rommel thinks is best. Montgomery gives orders to 3rd to pursue the enemy, but that's not carried out until early the 5th. Rommel is astonished by the lack of pressure from the British, who are in fact trapped in confused traffic jams, but still, 10th Corps is heading through the gap to hopefully drive around Rommel's line of retreat, while 13th Corps is cleaning up in the south, where the 4 Italian divisions have been left to surrender with no food or vehicles. Monty wants to block the coast road and catch the enemy at Fuka and Matru, but that doesn't happen. Several left hooks fail to catch him in any big numbers, and the last one of Montgomery's traps is sprung today, the 6th, at Bagush, catching again very little. But heavy rains have arrived, and the ground south of Matru is now just a bog, so his armor isn't going anywhere quickly, and Rommel escapes all traps with 10 panzers and some 10,000 men. But let's be very, very clear. Even with Rommel escaping to fight another day, this is a pretty decisive victory, and Montgomery, Winston Churchill, and the British Empire in general really could use a great victory, however costly. Churchill has the church bells ring across the country. 8th Army takes 13,500 casualties. The Axis lose over 27,000 men, according to David Braddock. Stephen Sears says 30,000 are lost just as POWs, and Ken Ford does not even list a number for Axis casualties, though all 3 of them agree on the 8th Army total. But whatever the case, 4 German divisions and 8 Italian ones no longer exist, and Erwin Rommel is on the run in North Africa. The Allies are hoping for another big victory to follow in North Africa, further west. I'll explain. On the 4th, 19 German and 21 Italian subs take up positions in the Western Mediterranean because of the increased shipping concentration that's been cited there lately. The German Naval War Staff thinks this day that new Allied landings are going to be in the Tripoli-Benghazi area. But they are actually the troops for Operation Torch, the invasion of Vichy French African possessions. The German Naval War Staff, which always kept a watchful eye on the central Mediterranean Sea area because of the shipments in support of Panzer Army Africa, was aware of the key position Tunisia would occupy if French Northwest Africa was invaded. Having on November 6 ascertained the size of the invasion fleet, though this was still expected to make a landing east of Benghazi, it realized that the decisive battle for North Africa and the Mediterranean had begun. It should be added that Hitler's initial reaction to this threatened landing in Rommel's rear was surprisingly feeble. He requested the Italians to set up a local defense and left it at that. On November 4th, American diplomat Robert Murphy finally tells French General Charles Mast that the attack is to kick off in just 4 days. American General Dwight Eisenhower has told him to do this, but Murphy had wanted to tell him back on the 27th. Mast tries asking for a 3-week delay to organize pro-Allied French operations, but this is rejected, and he will just have to get together what he can as quickly as he can. On the 5th, Eisenhower arrives in Gibraltar and sets up headquarters. Andrew Cunningham will run the naval forces, Jim Doolittle and Air Marshal William Welsh the air. Kenneth Anderson commands the British First Army. On the 2nd, Henri Giraud, who is to be in charge of the French forces and who is still in Vichy, France, gets papers stating the Allied policy re-France. 1. She will be restored to her pre-war boundaries and her sovereignty. 2. She will handle purely French affairs without American interference. 3. The US government will regard the French as an ally. Giraud is upset, though, that there will be no simultaneous attack against southern France, but he will cooperate. Just after midnight last night, he is evacuated by submarine. He should arrive in Gibraltar tomorrow. That evacuation is Operation Minerva. An unsuccessful operation by the Allies this week is Operation Leopard, the night of the 5th, to land 10 tons of military supplies for the Algerian resistance. The British are unable to contact those on shore, and it is abandoned. The Allies are also planning new attacks on Guadalcanal. Marine Commander Alexander Van de Grift plans to go on the offensive and drive the Japanese back beyond artillery range of Henderson Field, and to cut off their possible retreat along the Lunga River. Merritt Edson's 5th Marines are rested and lead the attack to take Kokumbona and push the enemy beyond the Poha River. Opposite them, Tadashi Sumiyoshi has 2 regiments along the eastern bank of the Matanikau. On the 1st, 3 battalions of the 5th Marines cross the river and attack. 2 of the battalions make progress, but the 1st does not, so part of the attack will now swing north along the coast and try to surround the enemy. This works on November 2nd, and by the end of the day, they're not only dealing with the Japanese in the pocket, but are well west of Point Cruz. On the 4th, Lieutenant Colonel Twining urges a push to the Poha, precisely what the Japanese most fear, and argues that the enemy's strong point at Point Cruz is their last solid defense line, as is indeed the case. But the normally aggressive Merritt Edson opposed a deep advance, invoking images of entrenched Japanese opposition in front and a dangerously open flank inland. Vandegrift sides with Edson, and that is that. They halt about 4 kilometers short of Kokumbona. On the 6th, Carlson's patrol begins. This is the 2nd Marine Raider Battalion under Lieutenant Colonel Evans Carlson, conducting a long-term jungle raiding operation against the Japanese, who are also being hit hard on the Kokoda Trail. In fact, on the 2nd, the Australian 25th Brigade recaptures Kokoda and the airstrip. This is a big deal for future resupply. On the 5th, the Australians attack Oivi. And here are some numbers to end the week. In the Battle of the Atlantic for October, the Allied shipping losses are 637,800 tons. U-boats sink 94 ships for 619,000 of that. The increase is in large part because many escort ships have been diverted to cover the 10 troop convoys to Morocco and Algeria for Operation Torch. And at the beginning of November 1942, Stavka estimates 5 million Axis troops facing the Red Army. Their own field armies number 6,124,000 men, 6,956 tanks, and 3,254 planes. So, Paulus is going to launch another final offensive in Stalingrad, and Zhukov and Rokossovsky are going to launch their counteroffensive. These offensives are scheduled to go off at roughly the same time. The outcome of that is going to be very interesting, because if everyone is playing offense, well, no one's really playing defense, and that is a sure recipe for a great many dead bodies. Wait, well, no. What am I saying? This is Stalingrad. Every single thing, the mere passage of time, is a sure recipe for a great many bodies. If you want to see more Soviet plans for offensives and a lot of other amazing stuff, you should check out our Cuban Missile Crisis Day by Day series over on our Time Ghost History channel. You will be impressed because it's awesome stuff. 13 episodes covering each day of the crisis and 2 preludes and a day 0. And you can check that out right here. Our Time Ghost Army member of the week is Gatito Meow. Okay, sure. It is the army that finances this and this Cuba series and everything we do, so join the army at timeghost.tv or patreon.com. Do not forget to subscribe, and I'll see you next time.